Hey guys, if you just logged on there now, we're all doing well. Just going to mute you guys there now because I'm just getting a bit of feedback. Yeah, obviously be able to unmute yourselves later if you want. So welcome guys, if you just joined in, hello. Just I'll give first couple of minutes usual for everyone to join, and we're just still waiting on Meriel there who's joining us today. Yeah, so we'll give a few more minutes. Hey Meriel, how you doing? Nice, thanks. Nice background there with the world behind you.
Yeah, it actually we put up last year, but it's actually helped a lot with your phone.
Yeah, real life screen background. My world map is off to the left. You can't see it. Yeah, it's something nice at the moment as well, especially when you can't travel. Just at least have the map near you.
A bit mocky in some ways, though.
And that's it. Oh, there's Sarah as well. You do have my 68. Okay.
Hi Emma, sorry I was saying hello there, but I was mute.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I'm always on meeting everyone, so when you come in, you're first muted. Yeah, so Gary, you guys have met before, haven't you? And in normal life pre-COVID too, that Meriel you've done before, yeah.
Meriel has been coming to give a talk a few years now, haven't you? But
this is only the second year.
We met also at the I Wish event.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, of course, yeah. God, it feels like a long time ago now, actually.
I know.
Mass events, yeah. Different world.
I know. And then, you guys weren't doing the electric picnic then. That would have been the year. It must have been Katie then, was it?
Yeah, that would have been Katie last year. Yeah, because I think the guys did it last year in summer. Yeah, but yeah, obviously no.
Sadly, not this year. Yeah.
Well, I Wish was the only one which happened just in time, really. So anything back was only a few weeks before.
I know. If we knew it was the only one, we would have made more of an effort.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah, it was a good event though.
It was. I know, it's very good. Now the organisers are great, to be fair. Put a huge amount of work into it. It was great speakers and everything.
Yeah.
Might just give maybe 2 minutes more, will we, Sarah, just to let maybe some last people come in. 78 there, maybe just till 5 past, and then we'll start off there, maybe. Yeah.
So this is the students had their last tutorial week for the EWB. So
right, yeah.
Almost finished now. They've got their posters to complete, and their presentations are in the final week. So that's the week of the 14th.
Week of the 14th. Okay, yeah. Actually, just to mention, no, obviously given for this semester, it is late, as we were saying before, but I was talking to Grace in Lusaka there earlier. So actually she was mentioning that next Friday afternoon, herself and the guys could be available if anyone is interested in getting feedback. Or kind of talking, but I know at this stage it is obviously I know it's late before presenting, but even just from a personal learning perspective, if there's any questions you have, but obviously if not, if you think it makes more sense to tie it to next semester for anyone who continues on, we could maybe link it in with the colleges doing it next semester. But yeah, maybe we
might be better actually, because they have a class test. So
okay, yeah, so that wouldn't work. No problem. No, that's grand. We'll plan for May 2021.
Be focused on that. Great. Although the week after, or if they wanted to join in on any of the sessions in the last week, they're very welcome.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I'll let them know. So the week of the 14th is when the guys will be presenting this, Sarah. Yeah.
Yes. I'll come back to you when I have the logistics worked out of that. I'm just
sure. Yeah.
I've given the groups the option of coming into college. If they want to.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So not all of them want to, and so if any of them do, then I will. I just need to figure out the logistics of it, but ask them today, I think this morning. So hopefully by Monday, I should have a good idea of what all the groups want to do, and then we can move on from that. So if it's just online, I can give you links to the sessions.
The sessions, yeah. Cool.
Anyway, even if it is face-to-face, I can still give you links to the sessions.
Yeah,
everybody would be coming in any case, so it will be some people presenting live and then other people sort of watching like this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's perfect. But yeah, we'll make sure then we have it. Well, yeah, once you have the schedule from you, we'll definitely work it in, but obviously make a note anyway. There's the week of the 14th, because different colleges have different weeks and stuff that they're doing the presentations in December. But I'll make a note for you guys then.
And normally we're this is quite late for us. Normally we'd be finished by now. Well, not by now, but we'd be finished way before the last week, The
last term, yeah. So different.
So it's all pushed out a bit this year.
Yeah, time change indeed, yeah. Well, maybe I'll make you host, Meriel, and just so you can share their presentation, and just to say a few words to introduce you, but hang on, I'll just make you host first.
I will say before I start, I've actually been having internet issues today. So if anything cuts out, please give me a shout. Let me know. Yeah,
I will do, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, if at any point you are, I don't think you are from your presentation before, Mel, but to recoup from last week, we actually, Fiona thought she was sharing sound as she wasn't. So if at any point you're sharing a video, we'll double check on sound, because we had a sort of silent session last week. So I was kind of funny though, but yeah, we can double check all that. Yeah, so now just to find you from the list, say to, thank you, where are you there now? Oh yeah, sorry, you are. You've moved to the top, of course, because you're on camera. Okay, so I've made you host in our mail. So just to mention for anyone joining, if you can keep an eye, just click and admit all, as there might be some more people still joining the session. So just as host now, if you could let them in, because I won't be able to let them in myself. So yeah, that's the only thing to mention. And yeah, just to briefly introduce Meriel, guys. So Meriel works with the EWB committee, same as Fiona, who you met last week. And she's been with EWB, is it 2 years now, Meriel? Have I got that right? Yeah, 2 years, yeah. So she's originally from Florida and has been here in Ireland 2 to 3 years, is it? A bit longer than maybe being with EWB Ireland. Trying to remember, yeah. And works with Hayes Higgins Partnership, and her background's civil engineering, and she works now, very interesting projects. She works in the design and supervision of construction of Dublin Zoo habitats, as well as socialising and hospital construction work. So today, Meriel is going to be talking about her experience, excuse me, her experience volunteering in Bolivia and working with Bridges to Prosperity on bridge construction there some years ago, when she was studying in Cornell University in the US. So I'll pass over to you, Meriel, and yeah, thanks for joining us today, and hope you enjoy our presentation, guys.
Perfect. Thanks, Emma. Now, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yep, all good, Meriel, yeah.
And you can hear me and everything?
Yeah, you're very clear at the moment, Meriel.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, if not just someone say something.
Yeah.
So as Emma said, I'm going to be talking about my experience as a second year in college. So I believe you're all in second year as well, if I remember correctly. I was with EWB Cornell. I joined as a second year, and we ended up working with the community in Bolivia to build a pedestrian bridge. And we also ended up partnering with Bridges to Prosperity, which, just to make it more confusing, is now part of Engineers in Action. So like the associations have changed, but don't worry about that part. Emma kind of did a pretty thorough job of introducing me, but just to give you some background, I'm from Melbourne, Florida. I grew up there. I went to college in upstate New York at Cornell. That's where I joined EWB. My mom's actually from Dublin. She went to Trinity, so she's super happy that I'm lecturing at Trinity now. And I've been a civil and structural engineer at Hayes Higgins Partnership for a little bit over 2 years now. And I found EWB when I moved here because I was part of it in college and just wanted to see if they existed here, and they do. So here we are. So we learned a lot of things in this like year and a half of like international collaboration. Because I mean, as young like college students, we hadn't really had a whole lot of real world experience in general, let alone like in a different country. So one of the best resources we had was actually working with an in-country NGO in Bolivia, and this is Ricardo. He was our in-country engineer from Engineers in Action. EIA was the in-country NGO that we worked with. And so because of that, he is actually from La Paz, which is the capital, and you can see, I just put in a little map of like the different cultures in Bolivia because there's actually a lot of them. So he would have been Aymara, and we were working in the Quechua region, but just by the fact that he'd grown up in Bolivia, he was actually like very well versed in the Quechua culture and actually spoke like a good bit himself. So he would also like be our translator at times. Because a lot of the older generation in rural Bolivia actually doesn't even speak any Spanish at all. That's more the younger generations. So he was like our cultural and language translator. And yeah, honestly, I don't think the project would have been a success without him. Yeah, so we were working in Calcha, Bolivia, which is a small village of about 200. This was like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And so originally, a few people from the team, this was actually about a year before I joined, but a few people went to the community and So the community and the chapter were partnered through EIA and EWB, and we said, okay, we're going to do like a 5-year contract. So it was very clear from the beginning, we'll be with you for 5 years. We'll ask you what you need. We'll see what we can do. Like we can't promise anything because like we don't know what we can do at the beginning, but we will do our best. And like also they have to keep in mind that like we are students. We do work with professionals and we do have chartered engineers, but like we are students. And so on the original assessment trip, the team went down for a water project. That was the original plan because the community wanted cleaner water. However, when the team went down and did tests, because they live right next to the Vitici River, and that's their main water source, they found that there wasn't a whole lot of improvement that could be done. Like the water was actually pretty good. I mean, they're really high up in the mountains, so it was about as good as you got. And so basically the team told them the most we can do is like give you chlorine tablets if you want to chlorinate your water. And honestly, the community members weren't really interested in that. And it wouldn't have been like cost effective or sustainable anyway. And it wouldn't really have been like a project either. Like they were kind of like, we can just give you this, but that's about it. But the interesting thing is, as the students went and talked to like a lot of people in the community, a lot of people expressed the need to be able to access their farmlands during the wet season, because most of the farmland is actually on the other side of the river from where the village is. And they would say that it was hard for kids to like get to school. They would miss a lot of days of school. It'd be hard to get to the farms to maintain the crops and to even like bring stuff back so they could bring it to the market. And a couple, I think 2 little girls were actually swept away by the river like a few years before that. And it wasn't a frequent occurrence, but it had been an issue before. And so the students were like, well, if we could somehow figure out how to build a pedestrian bridge, would you be interested? And the community said like, yes, absolutely. So the students were like, okay, again, we can't promise anything, but we'll see what we can do. So the students came back and they were like, how on earth are we going to build a bridge? We don't know how to do this. No one's ever done this before. And that is how we found Bridges to Prosperity. So, and they're based in the US, I think. And they are, let me add some people. And they are basically like EWB, except they specialize in pedestrian bridges. So they kind of have like a template that is usually very cost effective, and you can use local materials, and it's usually easily found in like many different locations. So we ended up working with them. And these are just a couple photos from the community. So because the project changed, we actually had to go back and do a second assessment trip. And this was actually the summer before I joined as a second-year student. So a few people went down and they had to then find a feasible location for the bridge. There were issues with erosion, so they didn't want to like have something built and then have it swept away in the next like year or two. They had to test the soil, see if it would sustain like that type of loading and where would be most accessible and make the most sense. And so they ended up picking this spot here illustrated. You can see the village over to the left. And if you look to like the bottom right-hand corner of the photo, you can see the beginning of a lot of their farmland. So that was the spot that we ended up picking. And we got permission from the people who owned the land on the one side to build it there as well. Just a really basic overview. This was the design that we ended up coming up with for the bridge. It was a 50-meter span. When the students were down there for the assessment trip, they also had to find out just from like asking people what the high water level was going to be, because we didn't have a way of like being there during the wet season to actually test it. And we also wanted like historical information. So we just interviewed people who had been around for a while and could just say, oh, it was like yay high this year or something, and like the worst case scenario. And there was a good bit of an elevation difference. So we did have to have a pretty high tower on the one side, the left side, which you call the culture side, because that's the side that the village was on. And it's basically everything is basically held down by the self-weight of the structure. Like it isn't anything super fancy. It's mostly concrete and rocks and sand. The actual span is 5 1-inch steel cables, 3 for the walkway, and then 2 for handrails with timber crossbeams and decking and rebar suspenders as well. And then you just have like mesh fencing on the side. And then the anchors are just reinforced concrete. So one of the first issues, and possibly one of the most straightforward ones, was because we had such a high tower and we were trying to keep costs down and also think of time constraints, because we were going to be sending some students down for about 8 weeks to try and help build it. So we did want to try and fit it into that time frame, and we weren't really sure how we were going to do that. We did have this massive ramp, and again, it's like all concrete and rock. And like the rock and the sand we were able to gather from the river, so we didn't have to pay for it, but it also took a lot of time to gather these materials. And we had to mix all the concrete by hand. So that was also just in building it a lot of extra time because we didn't have any sort of machinery, like it was all just hand tools. And so because we were getting timber for the decking anyway, we figured we could just build the second half of this ramp in timber. However, we did not think about the fact that in the US, when you have timber dimensions, so we use the imperial system anyway, but if you say like a 2x4, so a 2-inch by 4-inch piece of wood, that's not the actual dimension of the wood. I don't remember why. Don't ask me why. But it's actually, it'd be like 1.5 by 3.5 inches. So we were actually using those dimensions to calculate it. But then when we ordered the material, where we were getting it from, they don't just like have wood supplies there, and they don't use the imperial system anyway. So we were like, oh, 2x4 is 2 inches by 4 inches. And we just like didn't think about that fact that they would go and actually cut a piece of wood that was 2x4. But that's not what we had calculated before. So that was a failure on our part for not realizing that and not thinking that through. But we were able to like reconfigure on site when we got there, and it just took a bit of extra like recalculating. But it's just a lot of things like that, especially with units and things that you have to be very mindful of when you're trying to work in different locations and with different people. Another issue that we encountered with the decking, we were trying to figure out what kind of timber, because one of the most important things for keeping this cost effective and also trying to support local economy and making it sustainable, and having people be familiar with the materials and being familiar with working with them, was we tried to keep anything that we had to buy, we tried to keep it local. So we were researching what type of timber to use, and we found 3 that seemed to be commonly used in construction. And we were looking at things like water absorption because it would be in a very wet and sometimes humid climate. So we didn't want issues with like expansion or like rot or anything. But we also needed something pretty durable and workable. And so we had originally looked at the quebracho one here, which has a pretty low water absorption, pretty strong. And when they say the resistance, they mean like bending stress. And the issue with that is that it's very difficult to work with. And we actually read accounts of like working with the wood, and it said you could easily break like a drill bit or a saw on this. And we weren't going to have access to like replacement tools or anything. Like we were going to be pretty much in the middle of nowhere. So we didn't think that would be very practical. The name actually means axe breaker, as it says. And the ocho one, it wasn't going to hold up. It wasn't very durable. Had a very high water absorption percentage, so that was almost immediately thrown out the window. And the almendrillo, which we did end up going with, had a high resistance, was kind of in between for the water absorption, easy to work with. And when I was researching, I found that it was actually historically used in naval construction, so that was actually very promising for the durability and its ability to stand up to like very wet environments. So we ended up going with that one, and we were able to source it locally, which was the important part. And they call it kumaru. So apart from the technical prep with like the design and design checks and reports and everything, we also wanted to prep for the cultural part, and not even just like the language, because there were 8 of us going. There were 2 people that were fluent, 3 of us were conversational, and then 3 who had like little or no experience with Spanish. But even then, like I said, like a lot of the older generation didn't speak Spanish, they spoke Quechua. So even if you spoke Spanish, you were going to run into language barriers. And so we just asked the students who had gone before on the assessment trips questions, what it was like, what to do, what not to do. Same with Ricardo, we would ask him a lot of questions before and while we were there. And we also had a chartered engineer on site at all times, and they were all proficient in Spanish. So we just, yeah, there were just a lot of things to be aware of when we were going down. So 8 of us spent 2 months on site. We had 2 masons that were hired locally. However, for this one, when we say locally, this was a recommendation by Ricardo that we would not have thought of. He didn't want to create any tension in the village itself because it was very small, in like singling like 1 or 2 people out to like be the masons for the project. So we actually, from a nearby village, and when I say nearby, it was like 45 minutes by car, we hired them from that village. So they were nearby, they were familiar with like practices and everything, but we weren't like singling people out in the community, and they were also incredible. And we had a scheduled rotation of volunteers from the community itself, because we did want to be very clear and instill the fact that like this was their project as well. Like this wasn't us coming and just doing it for them. Like we wanted to do it with them. So each family they'd have like 1 or 2 people who would come like for a day a week, and they would just like rotate through, and we would be working on it full time. And so we were able to complete it within the time that we'd hoped to, a little bit faster actually. So you can see the approach right there. That was the one that we did out of timber, and then that was one of our masons mixing concrete on the right. That's the other mason on the other side building the brick tower that basically just holds up the handrails on either side. And then the top picture is the bottom tier on the culture side, which is probably the biggest one. So it basically has like concrete and rock around the outside, and then you just toss a bunch of rock on the inside. And then this was one of our chartered engineers and one of the masons winching the cables. And then that on the left is the finished culture side tower with the 3 tiers, minus the approach ramp. There were definitely a lot of go with the flow moments, as well as with any project really. One was every so often someone would have like a herd of goats or cows or something, and bring them across, and we basically had to just stop what we were doing for like 15 or 20 minutes and just like let them pass, because if you made too much noise, it would spook them and they would go insane. And you can actually see they're also like running over the cables that we had laid out across the river already. So we're kind of just hoping that no one like tripped over anything. Oh, and on the right, just I think it's a fun story, but we were trying to wrestle a very large tree stump out of the ground, and one of the community members came over and was like, "Let me help you." They spent the better part of like probably 2 hours, because it was like in the way of where we were going to do the excavations for the foundations, and we found out after the fact that she was 5 months pregnant. So we were like, okay, cool. And as well as working on the bridge, and doing all the hard parts with the community, we also tried to spend as much of our downtime with them as we could. Again, to try and communicate that we're not there just to like build this bridge and leave. We're not there to just like drop something off and like never see them again. And they were also like very happy to involve us in like their local festivals and things. And I think it was the American Cup for football was actually on, and they invited us over to watch the match with them. And we would also just like hang out at people's houses, and they would give us chicha, which is like this alcoholic corn drink to drink. And yeah, we just tried to spend as much time with them as possible, and everyone there loves football, so we play a lot of football matches as well with the kids. And at the end of it, we wanted to let them put their own stamp on the bridge. Oh, I forgot to mention before, we had weekly bridge meetings, so basically where any community member could come, and we asked that at least one representative from each family would be there, and we would have our whole team. And basically it was to get the schedule for volunteers of who was going to come when, and get any feedback from them, or if we had an issue or like needed something or ran out of something, then we could say, do you guys know where to get this? And also if they had anything that they wanted to discuss, then the community could bring it up, and it just gave them an open forum for any discussion. And so at one of the last meetings, we said, we want you guys to be able to put your own stamp on the bridge. So like, what should we do? And someone came up with the idea to put handprints of everybody who worked on the bridge in the colors of the Bolivian flag. So we were able to get some paint, and then one of the other guys wanted to put like a quote or something on it. And there was a lot of back and forth, but we ended up putting Paz, Amistad, and Amor, which is peace, friendship, and love. And they were ecstatic about that. And monitoring, so like I said, it was a 5-year relationship with the community. So there were 2 assessment trips. There were actually 2 implementation trips. The summer after we did the bridge, a few people from the team went and concreted over a canal that runs along the river and helps irrigate their crops. And then the summer after that was a monitoring trip for both. So it was kind of just following up, getting feedback, seeing if there are any like structural issues with anything, what maintenance needed to be done. We gave them maintenance manuals for both the bridge and the canal in both languages. So we gave it to them in Spanish, and then we asked a couple people from the community if they could translate that into Quechua for those of them who didn't know Spanish. And that's also part of the reason we tried to keep all the materials easily accessible and local and not super expensive, because we wanted them to be able to maintain this, because it has a lifespan of 50 years. So we wanted them to be able to fix anything or replace anything that needed to be replaced without like someone coming from like all the way from the US to take care of it. And a very interesting thing that we did not learn until the end of the implementation trip for the bridge, Ricardo was actually telling us that when we arrived, some of the local people were talking to him, and beforehand we had asked that they set out the site for the bridge and dug the excavations, because the first like 2 to 3 weeks was just digging, like that's it. There was no construction, it was just digging for excavations. And we had asked that they start that before we got there for like time constraints. And they hadn't done any of that. And at the end of the project, when he'd finished, Ricardo was like, yeah, they didn't actually think that you were going to come back. They didn't think you were going to do what you said. And so they just didn't see any point in like doing all the prep work. And it was a bit of a shock to us, but at the same time, we were like, that kind of makes sense, because a lot of the times, I mean, most of their experience, as they told us, with white people or like foreigners in general, was that they would come and they would promise all these things and say they'd come back, and then they would never hear from them again. And even the same with the local government, like the municipality, the mayor heard that we were there and we went to see him, and he was super excited and like really proud of what we were doing. And we asked if we could use a backhoe because digging by hand just takes an enormous amount of time. And we were like, we'll pay for it. Like we don't have access to one. And he was like, oh yeah, we can help you out. And nothing ever came of it, no matter how many times we tried to ask him again. And the same thing had happened with the community for years. They would ask for things and they would never get a response, be told like, oh yeah, we'll get to it. But then like the government never would. So I think that's just what they were used to. So I think that's definitely something to keep in mind when really working in any community that's not your own. Just keep in mind that like they might not be very trusting at first, and they might be very skeptical. So just, yeah, I wouldn't let it bother you, but also just understand where they're coming from. Yeah, so main lessons learned by our team and by myself personally is, one, have a liaison, have someone preferably who's from the community, and if not, at least from the same region or the same country. They're invaluable and they will help you to communicate more clearly and communicate better. Listen to what the community wants that you're trying to serve, because even if you listen, what they want and what they need might end up being two different things. So you kind of need to see the intersection of like what's necessary and what's feasible. And then also think local in terms of any sort of labor or materials, anything for maintenance. Just try to keep it local, keep it accessible. And again, also trying to support like the local economy and like empower people and give them jobs as well. And connect with them outside like the project that you're doing. Get to know them, just be their friend and try and collaborate. Don't just come in and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do it this way. And then also communicate clearly from the very beginning, and then follow through. Don't promise anything you're not sure that you can do. And then what you do promise to do, follow through with it. And so if anyone has any questions, you are more than welcome to ask.
Thanks so much, Meriel. Yeah, guys, I was just thinking actually, if you want to just unmute yourselves even to ask a question. I mean, feel free if you want to pop it in the chat box either. But yeah, maybe just so you can just have a bit more interaction. So maybe I'll unmute you there, or S, just so you can ask yourself to.
You want me to make you the host again?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you would need actually, sorry, of course, to do that, Meriel. Yeah, thanks. That'd be great. If you can find me or it should be right at the top, and then just right click and make host. Cool. Thanks, Mel. So I will find you there now, Morris. Or sorry, you should actually be even able to unmute yourself.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
I was just wondering, how did you find funding the project, or like were the funds brought in externally from yourselves, or like how did that work?
Yeah, so most of the funds came from ourselves through fundraising, through government grants, and through grants through our college. However, I think it's an EWB stipulation that the community that the project is for, they have to make I think it's 5% financial contribution, and that can actually be through finances or through materials or something. And it's just so that they are committed to it and so that they take ownership to it, but also recognizing that they might not necessarily have the resources to fund the entire thing. So most of it was through fundraising and grants.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions there, guys, Meriel?
Hi, Meriel. Just a question on the, so you did that as part of your course in second year, was that right? Or is this something you did in the summer period?
It was, so during the year, we have what we call project teams, and they're more extracurriculars, but it is like academic based. And if you were a part of it, I think after the first year, you could get academic credit for it, but it wasn't really like a class.
Okay. Okay. So this was like, volunteer work.
Yeah, pretty much.
Even through the term as well. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So you spent your summer in you going out there to work with the community?
Yes, sorry, yeah. So the summer part was also volunteer as well. And yeah, I mean, most people would get internships over the summer, which I would still highly recommend. But honestly, for this, especially, it was only after my second year. I wouldn't change it. I would definitely recommend that over an internship any day.
Yeah, the life experience too, isn't it? It's
yeah,
an internship. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it changed so much more than even just like my academic career.
Yeah. when you can see that you've made a positive difference for the community, that must be, you know, a really important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was a lot of life lessons as well as like learning within engineering. Like it was so much more than, as this presentation basically illustrates, it was a lot more than just the technical side.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose that's a nice thing with EWB project is that, you know, while it is engineering principles, there's a lot more to, you know, to engineering than you know, just the technical design and the, you know, the calculations and all of that. You know, you have to think about who it's for and the wider context.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider with any project.
And actually, just Meriel, I'm interested, you were saying you had just one trip before you guys went out. Was it kind of when you were discussing implementation, or had there been actually a series of visits out before, like the kind of the 8-week stay?
Yeah, so it was just the 2 assessment trips because it just like it wasn't really feasible to have multiple trips to the country, and it was only 2 because the first one was actually for a water project, so they hadn't done anything like planning for it, so that's why they had to go back the second time.
Okay, yeah. So yeah. So why again is, as you said, that the community, like there hadn't been enough visits, that they also thought that there was real buy-in, I suppose, from your part, that you were really committed. Yeah.
Probably, I would imagine. We did try to keep the communication up throughout the year, and like we would always be in contact with Ricardo. He would periodically make visits to the community and like check things out and like talk to them. But I think because it was just him, and like he is also Bolivian, like he wasn't really like one of like the students coming to work on it. I think they were very skeptical, which is understandable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But at the same time, from your point of view, you know, there's only, you know, so many kind of assessment, you know, that's also kind of cost, and, you know, there's, you know, it's a two-way thing for how much you can do that. But
yeah, well, you can understand, you know, they're, you know, if you heard that a bunch of students were going to come and build a bridge, you might be a bit skeptical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when the team decided to do it, because we didn't go into it thinking we were going to build the bridge, and then all of a sudden there we were, and it kind of just happened, and it was a little bit
amazing.
Yeah, but yeah, it's very interesting to hear you say that kind of like the, you know, sort of wants versus need, and then how the actual real kind of like stronger need came out from just that informal conversation. I suppose we all see sometimes in real life just conversations where you really get to the heart of things. But yeah, I suppose it just shows kind of the importance of conversation when you're involved in these projects to really hear what's necessary.
And I think I forgot to mention actually on the monitoring trip, I was able to go that summer as well. That was just like a week where we did like the assessment of the bridge, but we also tried to get feedback from the community, which we did like the summer that we were building it. But then after it had been there for a couple of years, we went around to families, partially just to like say hello and like catch up, but also to be like, how has it been? Like, have you used it? How often? And the response was actually overwhelmingly positive. But it was good to see how people perceived it, or like what the reaction was like a couple of years on.
Absolutely, yeah. That's been adopted. Any other questions, guys, at the moment?
We're very quiet this week.
I was wondering how the initial issue of water and water treatment was chosen.
So if I am correct, because this actually all occurred before I was actually part of the team, but the way it works is that EIA would work with EWB in trying to pair like student chapters with communities and projects. And basically the community in whatever country it is, in this case Bolivia, had to apply to EIA, and they would have whatever their issue was or whatever they wanted, and they would put that in the application. And then EIA and EWB, whatever their system is, would just try and like make like a good match. So they had originally asked for a water project, and actually up until that point, that is kind of what EWB at our college had done. It was just like water projects. Yeah, so that's what they asked for originally.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Maybe actually one to you guys. I'm just curious, has anyone actually in the group been involved in any kind of international volunteering? any kind of experience or anything they'd like to share that sort of yeah, that might be relevant or linked to it, or just generally sharing your experience. Just curious myself. Sorry, putting you on the spot. I know as well, all quiet in the Western world. To be fair, I know you guys as well may not have obviously had the opportunity to yet. I know there's still, well, still hopefully time after we come out the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of international work. But I suppose even like what you were saying, Meriel, like really anytime you're just in any community, it's really not even necessary that you have to be over in Zambia or over in Bolivia. It's kind of like what are the the needs, the aspirations, just like what's going on in the community where you are, so really kind of always being aware that when you're working there as any kind of professional, whatever capacity for you guys as engineers, that like what working with that community and kind of allowing them to kind of lead you on how you're going to work, I guess.
Yeah. I know even from an energy perspective, we would focus a lot on wind and a lot on the maritime energy, but to achieve our targets we have to go beyond that, and we have a lot of objection to more wind farms on land, so the government really have, they really understood that they have to get communities on side. They have to work with communities and get them to be the ones to want to have this energy transition. And then we can move forward with maybe more wind farms. If the communities own them, then they're likely to object. And also to look at like energy master plans for areas that communities actually lead up, rather than some sort of requirement from government. So communities are so important in in all aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And something for you guys to maybe bear in mind as well, just kind of I know you guys are coming towards the end of it, hopefully maybe you already have, but just in terms of how it's something Fiona touched on last week as well, but kind of how the kind of community own and maintain the whatever product you're working on going forward, and I suppose also the really interesting what you touched on, Meriel, of maybe what tensions might kind of like might come up, or and sort of I suppose if you're also thinking of yourself there, but even just in terms of kind of management, also thinking of like even like language barriers. If say you're thinking of like a instruction manual or anything like that for your product, if you are kind of like, how could that be as visual as possible, for anyone who might not speak English in over in Cabway, but also for children, and for replicating that. So there's lots of kind of things like that you can kind of keep in your minds maybe in at these stages.
I will also say, because I feel like a lot of times, like I said, the reaction to the bridge was overwhelmingly positive, but there's also probably always going to be like negativity no matter what you do, or like people who don't think it's the right thing to do.
Of course,
actually, the one that stood out in my mind when we were asking for feedback a couple years after the fact, there was one family who they were still like, oh, like it's great, like it's such a good thing, but they were like, it's not near our field, it's pretty far away from our field. And we were like, I'm really sorry about that. We looked at a lot of different locations and we tried to figure out where it'd be like in the middle and like where it'd be the best. And so they were not super happy about like the location of the bridge, but they were happy that it was there. So
you can't make everybody a bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Doing the best you can. That's it. And how many? Oh, sorry. Go on. Whoever that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much. What's the process with planning permission and that kind of stuff? Like, is there many hoops you have to jump through with designs and safety regulations, or how do you define building it?
So in terms of design, most of the regulations were actually on our end. We would work with chartered engineers through EWB, and there'd be different like check-in points, and we'd give presentations and updates on the design. And there would be like critiques and like, have you considered this, and like why have you chosen to do this? So it's pretty rigorous in terms of getting it approved by like qualified engineers on the EWB end. In Bolivia, we had to get permission, like I said, from the farmer who owned the bit of land that we were using on the one side. The other side was just, it didn't actually like belong to anyone. It was just like on a path that led to the field, so that wasn't an issue. And don't think there was any sort of like Bolivian planning permission that we had to do. Even if there was, like I said, it was like really in the middle of nowhere. Like the closest village was like 45 minutes away. And so even if there were like the people in the village kind of just do what they want. So basically we just had to get approval from the community. If they were like, yeah, that's fine, then we were like, okay, we'll go for it.
Thank you.
How many people lived in the community actually, Meriel?
At the time it was 200, and that was a few years ago, so like it could have changed. I know that they did / probably do still have an issue with kids who, once they get to like their teenage years or like young adult, they'll like move. A lot of them would actually move to Argentina. I'm not really sure why, but to like get better jobs and stuff, or maybe they just didn't like living in like the rural community, and a lot of them wouldn't come back. So there would be like children, maybe up to like 14 or 15. And then there were like older people, like over 40. Like there wasn't, or even over 50 actually, I'm not sure. But there really wasn't like much of an in-between. And like we did actually talk to them a lot about it. Like there was one of the girls in the photos, she was like 10. And over like the couple months, she just like loved hanging out with us, and we found out that her parents and like baby sister, I think, were like in Argentina, and she lived with her grandmother, so she like never really got to see them, which like we understand for like financial purposes why that might be necessary, but it was a little bit sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard about that in terms kind of rural exodus. Yeah. But yeah, in the weekly meetings you were mentioning as well, they had the children. Did children join those as well? Actually, had you mentioned in your presentation? Yeah, they did. Yeah, all the kids and then the older. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's great. So you had it as a real like whole, the whole community meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really nice thing, was that the kids were always included in everything. Like whether or not they like actually paid attention, I don't really know, but they were there and they were part of it, and like they enjoyed it, and they were super interested as to like what was going on. So it was really great that we had a lot of the community highly involved in the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the children going forward, as you say, it's that sense of kind of ownership, like even if they maybe don't remember exactly what they remember, being there, being part of it, and kind of being able to be going forward. So like it's really important for them as community.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think for any project, at the end of the day, if there isn't community buy-in and if they're not invested in it, then it's not going to take off.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, hello. Sorry, thank you very much for your presentation. Considering that you went into this project looking to improve people's access to water and came out of it having built a bridge, do you think it is possible to see the real problems in these communities from like a foreign context, or do you really have to go to the places and speak to the people who live locally there to see these problems? So I know it's probably quite a bit vague.
That's all right. I mean, in a sense, I feel like this project still gave me a very narrow view, because it was just the one community in the one place. So from a personal perspective, I think it's probably just best to go to the community and ask. I know that you guys don't have that benefit, or I don't think you would have the benefit for your project with Zambia unless you happen to have contacts.
But it's happening, unfortunately, towards the end of their project. It's dominating connection. But yeah, I mean, even still, it's not going to be the same as your experience to be able to, to really kind of from the beginning talking to people. But yes, go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, I think that is one of actually the major issues in like humanitarian engineering in general, is that people will go in thinking that there is this one issue, which might be an issue, like they're probably not wrong, but thinking that that's the one that they need to go in and fix, and like that might actually not be the most immediate thing, that might not be what the people want. So it is always better to ask before just walking in and be like, this is what we're gonna do. But yeah, I know you guys don't really have that luxury, unfortunately.
Try to kind of, I suppose, framing it through kind of, colleagues of ours at EWB went out there earlier in the year, kind of like doing assessment on the ground and speaking with people. That's how the kind of, the broad sort of themes for you guys working on where it comes from. But yeah, it's a really important part of it. And I suppose it's kind of a continuous journey then really as well, if you're to you know, win the competition, and if it was to be possible to go out to Zambia, it's going out with an open mind then to kind of see how communities interact with the product at that stage. And, you know, maybe it is something relevant as Meriel says, but maybe it needs to be adapted in some way. And I suppose it's kind of a, you know, it's a constant kind of dialogue, I guess, at that point then, and kind of keeping an open mind about, you know, development and what might come next at that point. But yeah, it's a valid point. Thank you.
In response to that question, actually, I meant to mention, but that in this particular case, again, this specific case, water actually still was an issue in that general area. So it's not that it wasn't an issue, but it wasn't like the most urgent, and it wasn't the most pressing, and it wasn't actually even like the cleanliness of the water. It's actually more just access. Because during the dry season, like we were there in the dry season, like there were days where like there just wasn't any water, so we had to be really careful with what we used. So it is an issue, but not in the way that they thought it was, and not in a way that we had the capacity to address it. If that makes sense.
But yeah, it's something that, you know, we're very keen to address as well, and that hopefully from, I'm not sure if it's going to be possible for you guys now to talk to the people that we've kind of established a relationship with in Zambia. Obviously, with the group they're working with the school, it's just not, you know, not possible to kind of set you up with talking to the children online. But, you know, this is why we're kind of working to establish a connection with the youth organization in Lusaka to enable these conversations and enable and kind of informal conversation as much as possible. That, you know, that also, I suppose, you know, there's power dynamics, and when you sort of like go in, like you touched on, Meriel, maybe as like white people coming into the country and having an idea, you know, and that trying to, I suppose, being aware of those, you know, power dynamics, and maybe when you're sort of arriving on time country, but just trying to facilitate, you know, kind of a two-way discussion, and just kind of like keeping an open mind. But yeah, it's something we definitely want to integrate earlier on into the course going forward. So hopefully this connection that we've made with this youth organization, Lusaka, will grow, and it'll be something for maybe some of you guys next year, as we said at the start there, or certainly for future groups. Is it something we'd like to embed? Definitely. I mean, in terms of design thinking, obviously empathy being at the heart of it, you know, that if at the beginning you can understand what the real need is and where people are coming from, and kind of getting their feedback and input at the beginning, then that's usually helpful, obviously, in your product development. So something we want to address to improve. Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's getting to that time now to
yeah.
Thank you very much, Emma, for organising it, and thank you for your time and coming along to talk to us again. Hopefully next year will be in person, so that'll be great. And yeah, so just thanks. Thank you both for organising. That's great. And thanks, Emma, for your help in organising these lectures throughout the term. They've been really important for the course and really valuable. The development of the project. So thanks very much. Great.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, no, and thanks so much to Meriel, and we're really grateful to everyone who's joined us from, well, obviously Liam at the very start, and Colin and Fiona, but, you know, people for really giving their time, so we really appreciate. So thanks so much to Meriel today for taking time out of her schedule. And yeah, if there's any last question or so, guys, they're happy to take it, or if not, we'll close off. And yeah, so I think everyone's just kind of saying thanks there in the tab. So yeah, huge thanks, guys, and best of luck for the next couple of weeks now with it. And if you do have any last questions, I think you've got Sarah can pass on my email address, and happy to take any questions from you. But otherwise, we'll see you on the week of the 14th for the presentations, and we'll look forward to hearing from you then and seeing what products you've come up with or what concepts. Cool. Okay, thanks a million then, guys. I'll close off now. So see you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye. Bye, Meriel.